Thanks for stopping by the channel, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. I am here today with Veronica. Veronica has a very interesting story to tell. She has some insight into current culture that comes from her, should we say, interesting past several years. She spent some time with some interesting folks, should we say. So, Veronica, if you would, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get started and see where this goes for our third time.
Third time's a charm, right? Well, I was born in Iowa, and I grew up in Iowa, Illinois, and I had a little bit of time in Texas. But I'm a Midwest girl, so.
And you currently live in Iowa?
Yeah, I'm in Iowa now.
Because your hubby staked you down in Iowa.
Yeah, we met here. I came to college in Iowa. So then he didn't go to college, but he was just an Iowa resident. And so I met him. I actually met his brother first, but then I met him. And then yeah, and then he didn't really want to move because, like, I want to be an actor. So I did have kind of a idea maybe that I would go to like California to go pursue that acting thing like years ago, but he's like a homebody and he doesn't really want to move. So, and I like Iowa, so I stayed and I decided I could, like, figure stuff out here. So,
You do know that in the history of the world, there's only been 5 people on any podcast at any given time that have ever said, "I like Iowa."
Yay, I'm one of the 5.
I'm kidding. I grew up there, so I have some friends down there, so I have to be very careful, right? So,
there's a lot of Iowa jokes I get made fun of from people that aren't from Iowa, but whatever.
That opens up so many windows. We won't walk through them, or doors, and we won't walk through those or crawl through the windows either. So, Veronica, you're how old now?
38.
You're 38. So you're 38, and you've lived a pretty interesting life in relation to, should we say, people you've affiliated yourself with in the past. So while you were in college, you ended up, for lack of better terminology, getting absorbed by a cult. Tell us a little bit about that, how it started, and how they kind of sucked you in.
Okay. So I lived in the dorm my first year of college, and I didn't know anyone because that's kind of how it goes. You move to college and you just meet new people. So there was a group of people on my dorm that invited me to a pizza party, I guess. And the dorm didn't serve dinner on Sundays, and so you kind of had to go out and get your own stuff or whatever. So, I didn't have dinner that night, so I thought, yeah, why not? I don't know anyone. I'll just hang out with these people. It'll be fine. Yeah, it wasn't fine. No. But I didn't know that until like 2 years later, which is awful. But they're a group that they'll call themselves a church group that are trying to outreach to young people because they want more young people to be Christians. So they piggybacked off the evangelical Christian group, and they're actually a cult because they controlled like everything. Like once you get in there, and they make sure that you have all of your friends are from there so that you will be less likely to want to leave because you don't know anyone else outside of the cult. So then that's how they kind of keep you there after they like befriend you for like a year and a half or 2 years.
Let's go back to when you first met them then. So they invite you to a pizza party, and you're like, I don't know anybody, which is always, anytime you like, that's how every bad story starts, right? So but let's go back to that. How quickly after you met them did they start with the isolation tactics?
Like 1.5 to 2 years, I would say.
Well, maybe let me ask the question a different way. Did they immediately begin to try and kind of squeeze you out of other circles of friends and kind of not in a heavy-handed way, but really try to become, oh, we're really your friends? Did that start right away? And was it subtle at first, if it was right away, or did they kind of uh, hold on a little loosely until they thought they had you? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was loosely because they don't want to scare people off because most people, if you automatically start like making them feel like they're being suffocated, they'll leave. So it was very subtle. I had a friend up on the 10th floor of my dorm, and he was a guy, and so I'd hang out with him. We'd watch TV, have, some drinks or whatever, just kind of chill. And they would always strongly encourage me to not hang out with him because he wasn't, like, they would say he wasn't a good person based on, I don't know, they would use religious language to try to muddy stuff up. And like, obviously he was a good person. He never did anything mean to me when, like we hung out, we talked, we watched TV. We never, yeah, like he, obviously I know he wasn't a bad person, but like they would just throw these insidious little things like, oh, because he had a lip ring too, which, was a big like, whoa. It's like the
So
tattoo and jewelry thing for them.
yeah,
It was just like, I don't know, they
and
would just pick on little stupid things to make him seem bad.
right. So, as a point of clarification from my from my perspective, um, theologically speaking, there are no such things as good people, and there's no such things as people who are unredeemable. But that's a theological perspective that we're all born sinners. We're all born, into a natural life of sin. And what Veronica is saying is not that this guy wasn't a sinner, but that what they were using to define him as a bad person had very little to do with a theological status and more of an outward judgment of the way he looked and the fact that he wasn't part of their group, so therefore he was he was bad. Veronica's not saying the guy was good in the sense of, oh yeah, he was wonderful and a saintly guy and strongly active in his own church, that therefore he was a good person. What she's saying is they were using outward, and this comes into play later on in the conversation. They were using outward appearances to make character judgments on him to isolate her from him. And there again, keep that in mind as we go forward. So Veronica, they slowly start to kind of put the pressure on you to become more and more involved with the church. And you had in our previous two attempts at this, you had indicated, and so for those of you that are watching, if we seem like we are really familiar with this story and how we're going to interact with each other, it's because we've been doing this. um, as you started to get more immersed in life with them, they started to put even more pressure on you to the point, like at one point you ended up moving in with people from the group and living in a house for the summer because you didn't have any place to live because your dorm/apartment was closed for the summer. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I didn't really have like friends, I would say. So they like to use the term like soldiers for God's army or whatever, which seems really militant and crazy. But I think I would compare it to like the word allies that we see in culture now, where it's like, are they really your friends or they're just supposed to be like on your side? But so I lived with a girl who was one of the cult people because, she was supposed to take me in or whatever. Like, you're supposed to like take care of your own kind of thing. But I'm glad that I moved in with her for a little bit because there's another girl that lived there too. And she is actually like a real friend now, and she actually escaped the cult like I did. And if I had never moved into that house, I never would have met her. So I'm grateful for that.
And the interesting thing about her too is that she was born and raised into this environment, in this exact same environment. So for her to walk out of that, to leave that, was even more amazing in the story comparatively than what happened for you to be able to walk out. Tell me a little bit, or tell the viewers a little bit, Veronica, about the situation where you were moving into the dorm, and you had a dorm mate, and you were working and going to classes and moving in all in the same day, and your room's just packed full of boxes, and you have all this work to do. Tell us what happened there. And there again, this is all very important to the story as we get past her story and into what she's observed in culture.
So I was sitting on my bed and I was, I don't know, getting ready to go somewhere because I was busy. And this cult person walks in. She sits on the bed next to me, and the bed has unpacked boxes behind me. And she goes, Veronica, I need you to go to the meeting tonight at 7. And I was like, but I'm busy. Like, there's literally like boxes behind us. Like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I have to go to work. I have, class. I don't think I'm going to be I have homework after I'm done with work and class, so I'm probably going to be spending the evening eating dinner and doing homework and then going to bed after I unpack. And like, I was busy. And she goes, well, okay, but God would really want you to be there, so make sure you're there. She was just like condescending, and she didn't listen to what I said and what was going on in my life because she didn't care.
She had an agenda for you. So she had a place that you needed to be.
Yep.
Because it's what was expected of you. So you're seeing things, but at the same time, you're starting to find that you've lost your circle of non-group friends. You've made friends inside. Obviously, now you have this lifelong friend that has walked away from this cult along with you, and you guys remain friends. You're not in it anymore because you didn't marry a guy from the cult, but you're finding yourself immersed more and more in the cult, and you're living this lifestyle, and you're starting to see some things about them that when you look back are troublesome. Like the hierarchy of who's important and who's not important, and not just you've said before that men and women definitely have different roles. Talk about that a little bit, what that looked like, and your understanding, because you were raised Protestant, going to church, and so you recognize these things. So your own recognition of the differences between men and women, and how they emphasize those things and what it looked like.
Yeah, so okay, traditional, differences between men and women are there for a reason, and that's not bad. But the way they did it was they would pervert it and then make it seem like those were the only things that were important. So like they treated women like baby factories. So like if you were married and you were a woman and you had kids, you were up at the top of the ladder of who's the most important woman. And then if you were married but you didn't have kids, you were less than. And then if you were single, you were really less than. And you were kind of treated like the town babysitter, because if a married woman had to go somewhere or something and she couldn't watch her kids for the whatever, they would like make you do it because you were single and you clearly don't have a purpose other than babysitting for this more important woman. And they did that with the men too, but with the men they emphasized work. So like a man who's married, who has kids, who's working in the church or for the church or doing something for, well, the cult, but like
They call it a church. That's fine.
Right. So, yeah, I just didn't want to confuse people. Like, this isn't a church. But so that those men are looked at and like revered and stuff. And then if a man is married but doesn't have kids but still does church or cult stuff, he's still good. But then a single man is supposed to actively be looking for a wife, and he's supposed to actively be serving in the cult. And if he's not, then he gets, reprimanded and all this kind of stuff. They love to pull you aside and tell you how shitty of a human you are because you're not doing what they said. So,
And so there again, to emphasize, Veronica is not saying that there aren't differences between men and women, and she's not saying that having children is bad. I mean, Veronica's not personally inclined, as we've talked about again, towards having a family. Doesn't make her a horrible person. Just that's not how she's inclined at this time. But what we do see is they use these outside, or not outside, they use their own subjective standards, make them objective to the group, and then hold you up to those things. And then when you're not meeting them, or to make you feel like you need to do more to meet them, they impose even more on you, which is the be available at the drop of a hat to, if one of these married women with lots of kids calls you and says, I need a lot of help around the house, I need you over here, you will go, or you're going to get reported. They'll talk about you. And you've mentioned as well too that there is a hierarchy of snitching, that if they if they see you doing something or talking to someone that's not part of the group, you'll hear about that later on. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so that was a little bit with the friend on the dorm floor that happened with him. And just like, I just felt like I was being like under surveillance all the time, because a lot of them also went to college like with me. And so we didn't have the same classes, but you'd run into people on campus or whatever, and they had all these kinds of like service projects, they like to call them. They're just stupid busy tasks that they want you to do, but like they would intertwine it with the college. So like our college used to have this thing called a Visha event, which was just like a celebration of some of the departments on campus. And so we'd have parades and like food booths and things like that. And so they would always make sure to have a booth to like, promote stuff or whatever. So
Which in and of itself is fine.
yeah. But then they would guilt you into like, you have to sign up for a slot to help out at the food booth, or you have to whatever, like you have to do this and you have to do that. And it's like, so then if you're seen on campus and they'll come up and make sure to ask you, have you signed up for the thing yet? And it's just like, I'm going somewhere. Could you excuse you, leave me alone kind of thing? You can't just say hi. You have to like have a yell at me moment.
But at the same time, in those moments when you were immersed in the cult, your perspective on it now is different. At the time, when they approached you like that, there was guilt. You immediately felt guilt when they would ask you to do something, or basically tell you to do something. You would feel guilt, and I would imagine ultimately end up changing your plans or changing your day to accommodate them, so you wouldn't be under the gun or under a spotlight for being such a horrible sinner because you're not doing what they expect of you.
Yeah, like a lot of times I was like, fine, I'll just go for like 15 minutes. And they're like, okay, make sure you're there. Like, just.
We talked, as we tried this again yesterday, you talked a little bit about the reality that they piggyback off of evangelicalism and doing evangelism, but their idea of evangelism and how to do it was far different. It was very much in your face. Here, take this, you're going to take this, or you need this because you're going to hell. And there again, there's a place for that in Christian evangelism, but theirs was not. It was very much, to go to heaven, you have to be part of our group. because we have the keys and the ticket to heaven, correct?
Yeah. Their way of Christianity was the only way. Like, so they're taking, that Jesus is the way, the light, and the truth, or something like that. That concept, they're perverting that, and they're taking, like, they still use Jesus, but they're saying our church is the only way. And it's like, that's not right.
And I'm gonna ask this, and this is one I haven't asked in the previous 2 attempts at this. Were there any other churches in the city where this college was that were sufficient enough to be considered Christian, or were the only Christians that group?
There's a Lutheran church here that I know of.
No, but I mean, would they have looked at that Lutheran church and been fine with that, or would they have said, "Oh, they're not us"? So, like,
Yeah,
they're
they
the only,
definitely are like, no,
yeah, they
no
were the
one else is
only,
a real Christian.
right.
Like,
So they were the only ones that were getting it right.
yeah.
Okay, and there again, this is important to the conversation. Tell us a little bit about the T-shirt incident, and there again, or the tank top incident, because this is there again. It's very important about these artificial standards that they put in place. So you like to dress like because you want to be an actor. You've wanted to be an actor, actress, whatever is politically safe now. And so, of course, as wanting to be an actress, that means you walked around in short leather skirts and fishnets and like ultra high heels and like with your midriff open and a bra that barely fit, right? That's how you dressed?
No. No, I didn't dress like Britney Spears in a music video. Yeah, normally I just wore like t-shirt and jeans or t-shirt and shorts, just depending on the weather. But they like to control my wardrobe. Well, everyone's. But they like to control the girls' wardrobe a lot. So, okay, so it was 90 degrees, 98% humidity, so really hot and muggy and disgusting. So I decided to wear a tank top to church because it's hot outside. And I get to church and someone goes, Veronica, you shouldn't wear that. You're tempting all the men.
Now, there again, this is important, and it's comes into play later on as we're taking a little bit more of a look at culture today and society today. But there again, Veronica's not advocating for walking around like a gussied up trollop trying to attract everybody's attention. That's not what she's saying. She's certainly understands the role of women in not putting themselves out there as sexually available for everybody that comes along. But there again, here's this subjective standard that's been objectified into this group, that they have the standard and that theirs is the only way. And they're imposing this on people, and you must meet this standard to be accepted. Now, this plays into a little bit about relationships as well. So tell us a little bit about how they handled marriage in this group, and then keep in mind, there, women aren't allowed to objectify themselves, and Veronica wasn't allowed to ever express that an actor, and keep in mind she wants to go into acting, that an actor was attractive, because that was sinful.
Yeah, so I watch movies a lot, and there's actors that I think are handsome. And so I think I mentioned it in passing or something because I thought the movie was good, and I thought the actor was handsome and a good actor, which seems like a harmless comment. No, I get Veronica. He's not a good person to like admire because he's too handsome. What? Like, I thought I'm a girl. I'm attracted to men. I thought that was good. Like, what are you talking about?
Well, he wasn't from the group.
Right. That's the thing.
And that plays in too, because you're not allowed to have standards for physical attractiveness, correct?
Yeah, it seemed like it anyway, or
right,
at least
so,
it had to be like really low standard.
and there's a lot of guys like me out there who would be thankful for that, but but there's there was also a reality in which, like, you were just supposed to pray for a man, and the men were supposed to pray for what?
So the men were like, if you had a crush on a girl or you wanted to get to know a girl better, the guys were allowed to pray for like a specific girl that they wanted to like potentially go and ask her to marry them. But the girl was like, you just pray for a guy to come. So it's kind of like they expected you to accept whatever guy showed up and asked you to marry him. And it was like, that sounds terrifying and creepy because I don't know this guy and I'm supposed to say yes to marrying him just because he said so. Like, and but they use the whole, you know, God will lead the man to the right woman. So women, you can trust that God led this guy to you. So it's fine because Jesus said it was okay. So you're fine. And it's just like, but what if I don't like him? Oh, but that doesn't matter. You're just a silly woman.
Well, I mean, you might be silly, but I mean, I'm gonna get chewed out for that.
No, the sarcasm from them is just
Well,
like the
it wasn't.
subtext is just
It wasn't
terrible. Like,
sarcasm. It's not sarcasm. It's their
no,
actual thought
like that
process.
was me, like
Yeah.
me being sarcastic about them, but they were serious.
They're
Like,
100% serious, and this is all incredibly important. So, I mean, so think about this: like the hypocrisy and the irony of this is that Veronica and the other single women of this group, they're not allowed to find men attractive because that's sinful. Because that means you're looking at them in a physical way, which means you're probably having sexual thoughts about them, and that's bad. And there again, you shouldn't be lusting after people. That's not the point. But so women are not, they're repressed, and you know, and we have to be honest, especially within Christianity. And anybody who watches the channel enough knows, and watches my content enough knows that I do try to come from a Christian perspective. I miss it quite a bit. I lose my temper at times and say things I shouldn't, but there is a reality in which you shouldn't just be pursuing somebody because they sexually arouse you. And if that's the way you're trying to attract people, there is a problem with that. And the church has at times been very oppressive with women. Women have been oppressed but to some degree by Christianity in different forms. But it gets worse in cults, obviously. And healthy churches are going to have a decent understanding of what level attraction, physical attraction, emotional and personal or personality attractions are like. They're not going to just look at you and go, oh, well, this guy approached you because God told him he's supposed to, which ultimately what it was is, which is ironic for Veronica because she wants to be an actress. So she's kind of has to rely a little bit on her physical attractiveness. Outside of, you know, some people in Hollywood, mostly the guys, like, but Veronica was never approached like that. So there's probably, she probably feels good about that, right? But at the same time, guys are allowed to approach, and we know that they're approaching the women they're approaching not because God's led them to them, but they've decided God's leading them to them because they've got the hots for her, but they can't admit it. So they have to sanctify it by saying, oh, I've been praying for this gal, and this is the one God's leading me to. Were women allowed to say no when they were approached?
I think that I think some did, but then they were, you know, strongly encouraged again to like go back to God and pray about it and make sure that you really don't want this. It's like they give you this like glimmer of, yeah, maybe you have a choice, but in reality, you don't have a choice.
There again, group standards.
Yeah.
You will meet these standards. And you said previously, as we've attempted this, what really ultimately ends up happening is it's very quick. Guy approaches a girl, they go out on a date, next thing you know, they're married.
Yeah. There were a lot of weddings that I went to, a lot of weddings. And like, I think the engagement period was maybe like 2 to 3 weeks. Like it was not, and like, there's no time to think.
And I would imagine too, if they operate like most Christian cults do in this situation. They spent no time unchaperoned or unsupervised. It
Yeah, I
was
don't know for sure because I
because you
never
never had to
had
go on a date.
experience, but yeah, yeah, I don't know for sure, but
So some things started to happen for you. You watched a movie with Christian Bale. You were working in a hotel doing housekeeping. Tie that Christian Bale movie in with where you found yourself and what happened and the mental duress and the emotional distress that you found yourself under.
okay, so I was working at the hotel and I was cleaning the bathroom and I was using, regular just Windex, I guess. And I had a weird thought that I never had before, which was, I wonder if I drink this bottle of Windex, how long it'll take someone to find me. And I was like, what? Because I've always really liked life. I have had zero desire to leave the earth. So it was concerning to me, like what is going on in my head? And I think at that moment I realized that I had in fact lost all sense of hope. So then I went home after that shift and I went and cried in my closet for like, I don't know how long. But then when I was crying, I was feeling like I haven't cried in like 6 years, or it's a really long time. And I was like, so then all of these things started coming back, and I think I felt like I realized I was like empty inside because I didn't have an identity anymore, because they had taken away, like, every time I liked something, they would yell at me about it. And I got yelled at like a lot. So then I started thinking like, well, what do I like? And so I was like, well, I like movies. I guess I've gotten yelled at that a lot, like gotten yelled at about watching movies for a lot, but I still did it anyway. And so I went to I had seen The Dark Knight, the Batman movie with Christian. So then I wanted to watch more movies with him in it. So I went to my video store. At the time, we still had a physical video rental store. So I got a copy of Equilibrium and I watched that. And like the first scene that he's in, he gets out of the car and he turns around and his eyes are like empty and kind of dead looking. And I saw like my eyes looked like that, and I was like, what is happening? And the movie is actually about a totalitarian society where human emotions are illegal, and so they medicate people to get rid of their emotions. Like every day they inject something into their neck to like suppress their emotions. But I watched the whole thing and it just felt like it was kind of mimicking like what I was living through, like with the emotions and stuff, because I think I was dead inside. Like I would say when I was in the cult, I felt like my soul had been like crushed, or I thought it was gone, but I don't think that's true. I think it was just buried or something. But so
The reality of this is that they destroyed your individuality. There was no understanding of, and I use this, and you saw my conversation with Carrie from Unsafe, and you saw my conversation with Jennifer Little Ragamuffin from Unsafe, and I use this phrase in both of those situations, in both those conversations. I believe is the imago Dei, the image of God in you, and they had crushed that out of you, your individuality. It's like every human being is made in the image of God. Now that's not physical. I mean, God doesn't have a physical image in that respect, but they had crushed that individual personality out of you and had molded you and shaped you into the community, into the collective of whatever this group is called, that you had lost sight of who you were. And you have these two incidents that you realize, like, I'm not me. And then you watch that movie and you're like, that's what I look like. That's not me, but that's who I am right now. And that's eye-opening for you. And you start to walk away from them at this time, because in your intellect and your emotion and in your spirit, you start like, okay, this is not right. This isn't healthy. How long did it take you to get away from them? How much pressure did they put on you to stay?
It was like 2 years that I think it was 2008 when I watched Equilibrium. So then I started declining. Like, they love to do the carpools because they want to make sure that you can't leave the event, you know, if you didn't like it or whatever, because you're supposed to like it. So I started declining rides from people to go to meetings and stuff. And I think I had my own car, so I decided I would like decline rides from people and I would drive myself. And then if I wanted to leave, I could. So it was kind of this gradual, like one step at a time sort of thing, where I was always kind of defying them, like even when I was in the depths of it, but apparently not enough to not get fully sucked to that rock bottom point. But
Right.
when I started leaving, I started doing defying things that were more than just like giving them weird side eye or telling them no so they would yell at me. Or it was more like I was physically removing myself from the situation. So like having my own car and driving myself away from the meeting was like the first big step, I think. And then I started hanging out with that girl one-on-one instead of with a group. The girl that I met, that's my friend that walked away.
Mm-hmm.
She walked away quite a bit after me, but so she was still kind of in that like brainwashy state, but she was nice and genuine. And so I picked her to hang out with, and we would just hang out one-on-one. And so that was another way that I was like trying to make friends away from like the group,
Right.
watchful surveillance kind of thing.
And understand too that what Veronica is saying is like they were encouraged to snitch on each other. Like, so like if you would say something to someone, there was no guarantee of confidence or confidentiality. Like, especially if you were talking about a struggle of something that they considered to be sinful, like instead of helping you walk through that, they would immediately take that and use that against you. But it was for your good.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Exactly like an abusive, partner would do. Be like, I'm doing this because I love you. What are you
Right.
talking about?
So you eventually walk away from this group and you maintain your friendship with the one gal, and you're off in your life now. You're married, and here you are. It's 2021, and so 2020, 2019, other things roll around, and you're kind of looking around, and you're saying, "Wow, there is some stuff going on that looks really familiar." Is that a pretty fair statement?
Yeah. I was feeling very oppressed. I hate that word now, but I think that it's not the same way that they're using the word oppressed, because
And by they, she's specifically referring to the Church of Woke-ianity and the cult of social justice.
yep.
When she says, anytime from this point forward that you hear us say they or them, for the most part, we're going to be referring to that current culture that's woke and social justicey.
Yeah. I noticed that I think I got really mad in like 2019, which is why I started my YouTube channel, because I was like, I need a place to say some stuff because I don't know what is happening. And I've always hated political correctness. always, like when it first came out, and it's been feeling like it's slowly been suffocating more and more and more and more, and I had to say something about it because I can't, like, so I'm feeling again like somebody's trying to squish my identity away, and like that's the one thing that I know I will never let happen to me ever again because it felt so awful. So I started like speaking out about stuff. And then 2020 came and all the lockdowns and stuff. And so then my husband was at home, so I couldn't do videos because he had like meetings and stuff. And I didn't want to, like, I'm over here ranting and yelling. So I don't want to like interrupt his call because he gets, he gets paid and I technically don't. So I wanted to give him the opportunity to work properly.
Strange that you
Yeah,
want
right.
money to come in.
And then, so then 2021 came, and I don't know, I kept feeling more and more like freedoms were getting taken away, and I was just so pissed off that I thought, like, I have to do my channel again. So I started uploading videos again in 2021.
The thing too that Veronica, and there again, because we've been doing this now for several attempts, the thing that Veronica is starting to notice is that a lot of those same tactics of these subjective standards that the rest of society should be able to see as subjective, they're being objectified. So they're being made objective within these groups, within the Woke-ianity and the cult of social justice. They establish these standards and they hold you to them, and they will snitch on each other. And we see that with the apology tour culture. And when we talked before, Veronica, we talked about the similarity between you and Joshua from Disaffected, in that here you have you who's raised Protestant Christian, ends up into a cult, ends up leaving the cult, and looks over now and sees the exact same mentality in their communities. You have Joshua, who's an openly gay man, gets wrapped up in the LGBTQ plus community and their agenda, starts to see some things, walks away, steps away, and now looks and sees the exact same things that you see. And you two are, granted you've never met, but are both talking to people, and we met through the Unsafe Space chat group. But you're both saying things from completely different perspectives about your own experiences, which couldn't be more diametrically opposed, but pointing out exactly the same problems. Joshua obviously coming from especially a mental or personality disorder perspective, and pointing these things out, and you looking at it from having been immersed in a cult and pointing out this is a cult. These people are in a cult.
Yeah.
I asked you before, and I ask you again. Right now, do you think that it's the cult is kind of in its heyday? Will it be waning soon, do you think, from what you're seeing of people? Or do you think that they're slick enough right now that they're kind of in that place where they're really kind of recruiting people because it's popular to hold these views, and they've popularized their views?
So I think that it has gone mainstream, unfortunately. But in that same sense, it has gone mainstream. So more people are now seeing it. So I think that is a good thing in a way that there's more people to say, hey, this looks wrong, this looks weird, what is happening? So I've been watching a lot of different things on YouTube, and there's all kinds of different communities where I've been noticing people. There's always there's a few crazy people leading the charge, and then there's a whole bunch of people following. But then there's always like that one or two people that are kind of like standing there thinking, this is wrong. And then they slowly kind of go like the opposite direction of all of these other people. So Josh is a good example. So
Josh,
the
yeah.
LGBT community, he left that. Blair White is another one. She's, I think, trans. She's not an activist, so she's speaking against the craziness of that community. I've seen people from the fat positive community get really mad, so they're like speaking out against that. And so I think within all of these little groups, there are a few people that are getting upset and speaking out against it. So I think that it's good because it is kind of in a heyday and it is kind of taking over mainstream, but there are people that are starting to get a little braver and
There's
step out of
cracks
this
in the
and speak
foundation.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, there's cracks in the foundation.
Yeah.
One of the things that we've talked about, Veronica, is the reality that nobody's going to believe this, but you're Russian by descent.
Yeah.
She doesn't speak Russian that I'm aware of, but or do you? Are you a
little bit.
Russian?
I just know a few words like
Are you a Russian bot, Veronica?
Spasiba. No, I'm not a Russian bot.
All right. But she might be a Chinese bot because we talked yesterday and we think that her family her heritage probably hails from the southern Russian area. So
yeah, it's like this. It's the border between Russia and China, and I
what would
think
have
my
been
family.
Mongolia?
Huh?
It would have been Mongolia at one time.
Well, I think my family, like the ancestry, I don't know. For sure, I didn't look into this. This is all speculation. So,
That's
southern
fun.
Russia,
Speculate.
China border. I know I have some family in like Southeast Asia, which is kind of like underneath that. So, like they migrated down into there. So, yeah, there you go.
So the funny story that Veronica told, and I'm going to tell it because she had somebody from the cult that she was in was going to take Asian studies so she could understand Veronica more. I don't know that would have helped her at all, but anyway, side story is that there's another one of those similarities because what you see is a lot of people would look at Veronica, see what appears to be a Asian heritage in her, and immediately jump on this bandwagon that oh, she's Asian, so she's part of this oppressed people group, and she hates that. And tell me a little bit why. Tell me a little bit why you hate that so much, and not just from the perspective of that cult that you were in, but what's happening with the cult now.
Well, so I grew up in Iowa and Illinois and Texas, but I feel like Chicago was the place where I lived in Chicago when I
I'm
lived
so
in
sorry.
Illinois. So I feel like that city is like my hometown, just because the age that I was when I lived there is when I had the most friends and I was more social and all that kind of stuff. So that's my hometown in my heart, right? So I'm from Chicago. And I've always been a huge patriot. I love America. It's the best country ever. I don't care if anyone disagrees. It's fine. So I have this like very American spirit, I would say. So then imagine when somebody calls you or says that I'm Asian. Asian and American are not bad in and of themselves, right? But they're different, like a lot. Like Asia is very different from America. So I think that the reason I get mad is because I feel insulted that you are calling me un-American. This patriot you are calling un-American. I get so mad.
Well, they're teaming you. They're trying to put you into a collective of oppressed people.
Yeah.
And so you hit a lot of those points, that intersectionality. You get, well, you're a woman and you're clearly, you must be Asian, which of course, ironically, we're not. Are we supposed to? We're not. Are we supposed to notice those? I don't know. We don't notice it, but we're supposed to be aware of it, but not take it into consideration, but at the same time, make sure that we're taking into consider. I don't know. So here you are. You're Asian and you're a woman, and you identify as female. I don't know, like I don't even know what that. And so you're super oppressed. You have at least 2 points of oppression, according to all the critical theories. Now, where you're wrong is that you're cisgendered and heterosexual. So I mean that takes your other. So now you're back to a 0.
Oh, and I
But,
love America, so I'm an awful,
no, so you're
awful
a -1 now, right?
Nazi.
Right, and
Because
you're
I
a
love.
traitor. You're a traitor to oppressed Asian women. I mean, is that not how it's handled today?
That is how it's handled today, and my reaction was to, like, when I hear that, I'm just like, sorry, not sorry. Like, but yeah, that is how they behave, and I'm thankful that I haven't really met like an SJW in real life to actually like tell me that to my face, but they're crazy. That line of thinking is crazy.
Oh, she attributes not having run into that yet because she lives in Iowa, but we're also seeing things in Iowa that I would have, having grown up and graduated from high school in Iowa. There's even now I'm over here going, I can't believe that just happened in Iowa. So I like there's
Yeah.
So what I think the reason why this conversation is so important is that a cult is a cult is a cult is a cult. And even if a cult is apparently fostering or forwarding what appears to be a really good idea or a positive, it doesn't in and of itself make that thing a positive. And so sure, maybe the cult that Veronica was in before probably kept people from doing a lot of really bad things. I'm imagining there weren't a ton of people in your church that were like running around getting pregnant out of wedlock, having a bunch of kids with a bunch of different baby daddies, and probably weren't committing a lot of crimes where they were getting arrested and becoming a burden on the criminal justice system. I would assume that's true.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it safe,
Right.
as we heard, because it affected your mental health. And that still affects you to this day, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I have PTSD and I think I have depression too, but I think their PTSD is more evident, I guess. Because I like, it's like words or memories or I don't know. So I'll watch things like Handmaid's Tale or something, or things that are about like totalitarian things, and then obviously memories will come. Or sometimes I'll just have weird nightmares that are unrelated to anything, but it's usually of me being chased by something or somebody trying to kill me or something. And so the PTSD comes in because the nightmare turns into a night terror where I'm physically reacting to my nightmare while being asleep. So like I've had times where I've like kicked my feet around because I'm running away. I have to sleep with a pillow like on my chest because it's like helpful for like, it's a tie to reality basically. So like when you're asleep and you're unconscious and you're stuck in your dream world, the thing on top of you or whatever, like people have had like they would put
It
writing
grounds
on the
you.
wall or something, so if they wake up they can read it, but like I didn't do that. But so
it
I've
grounds
punched
you.
the pillow before and it woke me up and it brought me back to reality.
Which is
So
better than punching your husband.
right, and that's why I do it, because I don't want to hit him or strangle him. I saw in a Grey's Anatomy episode, one of the doctors has PTSD, and he like was having a dream and he saw the ceiling fan and he thought it was a helicopter blade, so he thought he was back at war, so he ends up strangling his partner in the bed next to him. And I'm like, I don't want to punch my husband, so I should try to figure something else out. So luckily I punched the pillow, no one was hurt.
And I want to emphasize too that Veronica attributes this to her experience with the cult. She's not saying that this is something that happened recently. She's not saying that this is something, and you've yet to tell me. So unless you're going to drop a bomb on me, they didn't physically or sexually abuse you in this group.
No, it was all emotional torture, like
Yeah. It was emotional,
gaslighting.
psychological, spiritual torture.
Yes.
And you were dealing with this throughout your entire time in that group, just not realizing it until that moment in the bathroom in the hotel that you were working in. And then seeing that look in Christian Bale's eyes and realizing I'm an empty, hollow shell of myself. Um, uh, Jennifer and I, Little Ragamuffin, we talked about the lack of happiness and the joy in social justice. And when you started telling me your story about the cult, that made me think too about the same thing that we're seeing in social justice in the conversation that I had with Jen. That, and you see it as well. They're hollow, empty people, and the only time that there's any joy in them is when they're literally picking each other or other people in society apart and bringing them down, which is just like the cult you were in.
Yeah.
How hard is it for you then to see that? I mean, obviously there's some ideological and philosophical differences in your life, but do you think that the trauma, the emotional and psychological trauma that you were put through by the cult has also made it easier for you to resist what they're doing to
Yeah,
people?
absolutely. I like, as hard as being in the cult was, if I had to do it over, I would, because I wouldn't be the person I am today if I didn't go through that. And I do think that it gave me a bunch of strength to like deal with 2020 and to deal with all this new stuff happening. Because I lost my identity in the cult and it made me feel so bad. Now I have this desire to never have that happen to me ever again. And I don't care about, looking good or whatever to whoever, they like to virtue signal. So they like to be like, oh, I'm doing this because I care about people.
Right.
I don't really care how people look at me. And that's, I think, always been something, like even before the cult, I've always been like that. But it's become more evident now because I know that the second you give into that stuff, that's when you start sliding back into that mentality. And I know how not to do that because the cult was so mean to me.
And what I was saying before is that sure, they might accomplish some good thing. The cult might have accomplished some good things for the people in the cult, but ultimately they were very bad for the people in the cult. And that translates to the social justice cult and to Woke-ianity, in that sure, they may accomplish some things. They might be able to through being incredibly vocal about things like police reform or other groups being marginalized or oppressed. I know Veronica hates that word, but they might accomplish some good things, but ultimately they're actually hurting the people inside of the group that align themselves. And boy, here's where I'm going to go off the rails, people. The people that are being hurt the most right now, believe it or not, as much as, especially with Woke-ianity and critical theory, especially critical race theory, the people that are being hurt the most right now are the people inside who are allowing themselves to either learn to hate themselves because they're white, whatever that means, or the people who are being told that they can never succeed because they're not white and it's always white man's fault. Those people are being hurt because they're not being taught anything other than to be victims or to victimize themselves to virtue signal, to look good. That's going to have an incredibly detrimental effect on these people the longer they stay in that. Would you see it that way? I mean, neither one of us are psychological experts, but you lived through it. I've been watching this. Do you see that could be dangerous for people having experienced what you experienced? Do you think that could be dangerous for people that stay in it for a long time?
It's definitely going to have an effect on a person's mental health, but I don't think that it's permanent, because for me, like, I feel like I've healed a lot since I left. And every day I feel like I heal a little bit more. And even though I do have the PTSD, that's not stopping me from like functioning. And like my friend who left the cult, she was born into it. and she left. So that's hope that even if you've been in it for a really long time, there's hope that you can get out as long as you have, once you get a different perspective and you start questioning things, that's the start of you being able to leave. Like, you get the strength to like leave after you've decided that you can think for yourself. Because I think that's the main thing, where they control everything that you take in. And if you keep just doing that, then you'll be stuck in it. But if you question stuff, because that's what happened to her, like, she had a big rock bottom moment too. And then she started questioning things, and then she came and found me, and that's how she left. So it's not hopeless, but you will have emotional problems. Like, it's a guarantee, because it's so toxic for your emotions.
And to be clear, Veronica's not just talking about the cult she was in. She's talking about the people that she's seen in society. We mentioned before, and I told you this in a previous conversation, how similar it is in our society today. I watched a video the other day of, I think it was in New York or someplace like that, in a large metropolitan area, where a group of white people had all gathered in a park and had prostrated themselves in front of a black man or a black individual who was running them through a litany of confession, where they were confessing their evilness for being white and how they were guilty of all these things because they were white. There was no thought given as to whether or not they were actually guilty of it. They were just giving lip service and bowing down before this person. That's dangerous for both sides. Incredibly dangerous for both sides. And that is a cult. It's a cult. There's no way you can look at it and not see it that way. And what I want to say, and I know Veronica will echo this and back me up on this, her link to her YouTube channel, which, by the way, is serious but funny. She's working on it. She's trying to produce things on her own. She will tell you she wishes she could like do more, but safe to say that, right? You would like to be able to do more and have more equipment and things, but she makes good points, and she uses humor and sarcasm to do that. Sorry for those of you that don't like sarcasm, but useful tool. But reach out to her, find her through her YouTube channel, watch Unsafe Space, and then find the Unsafe Space chat group on Telegram. Reach out to people if you're struggling with where you're at. Reach out to me through my website. It's scrolling across the bottom down there. Reach out to me on Twitter. Reach out to me through my YouTube channel. If you have questions, I don't care if you're in a Christian cult or some other cult, or if you're like looking at the social justice cult or Woke-ianity, and you're saying to yourself, there is a lot of things about this that feel right but don't feel right. I want to ask questions. I'll talk with you. If you want to challenge anything that Veronica said, if you want to challenge anything that I've said, come on, reach out to us, reach out to me, and we'll have that conversation. We'll see where we're at, and we'll see whether or not your emotion is under control of your intellect. Carrie used a really good example that she got from somebody else, that your mind, your emotions, your mind is kind of like an elephant, and that your reasoning and your intellect is the jockey, the rider, and it's got to work really hard to control the elephant of your emotions. So that's what we have to do, is we have to bring our emotional responses to things under control of our intellect, of our logic, and our reasoning. And so if you're in a cult situation like Veronica was in, if you find yourself in a situation where you're like, okay, this feels really cultish to me, all this social justice stuff, Veronica and I are here to tell you, we'll talk to you. Find us. Veronica, obviously you lost a lot of relationships being in the cult. And then you lost the relationships that you did have, as unhealthy as they were. Found yourself probably incredibly alone for a while. And I know you still have friends and family that are in that cult. Has this been hard for you, talking about this? are you afraid of losing even more because of this, or are you at a point now where talking about your experience is worth losing if you have to those people as much as you hate it? And are you okay with the ramifications of speaking out against what is now considered, right thought? Are you okay with those ramifications?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm gonna love my family no matter what, and they still think it's a church, and I don't like reprimand them for it, or I don't get mad at them about it, because they have to come to realizations in their own time or it won't stick. Because you can't just, pound a different idea into somebody's head or try to and expect them to respond to you, because that's kind of what these woke people are doing. They're trying to pound ideas into our heads that we don't accept, right? And I don't want to behave like that. So, like with my friend, I just waited for her to have her moment of clarity. So I'm going to do that with my family if they decide to do whatever they decide. We've had a house divided with the political thing in 2020, so I've already kind of had some family be less nice. I don't know, nice isn't the right word. Like, they don't talk to me about certain things because they don't agree with me, and they're kind of, sometimes I feel like they're incapable of having a conversation, or maybe just not wanting to have a conversation, or wanting to like yell at me instead, so I just leave it alone because whatever. So I've already kind of experienced some of the like, I don't like this, so I'm just not going to talk to you mentality kind of thing. But with my family, they're not, there's, the love is always there, so they're not like flat out mean to anyone, but then at the same time it's like, I don't like what you have to say, so we're just not going to talk about it or something. I don't know. I had a conversation, not really, with one of my family members. She was talking to me
Like,
about being
not
a
really.
politician, and I didn't respond the way that she wanted me to respond, and so she just got up and walked away because I didn't say anything. Like, I didn't agree with her and her, like, I guess my outrage, I didn't have any. She had outrage. She got mad that I didn't have outrage, so she walked away. But like, that was the extent of the ramifications, I guess. And I've always been somebody that likes independence and free thought anyway. And so even throughout my life, like, people would ask me questions, and then they'd expect a certain answer because of, they thought I looked a certain way, or they thought whatever about me. But then when I didn't give them the answer they expected, a lot of them, that's how we became friends, because they're like, oh, well, that's, you don't think that way? That's so cool. So I don't really, and everyone's not going to respond that way, obviously, but I'm okay with that. Like, I've had people, I had a friend who, when I was like 12 or something, I played kickball with the guys because it was fun and I liked being active. So when we became 12 years old, the girl that used to play with us and me, she wanted me to go do makeup stuff with her. And at 12, I didn't really care about makeup, so I said no. And then she stopped talking to me. But I was like, whatever, I'm just going to go play kickball with the guys. I don't care. So I think that kind of goes along with what I do now, where I'm just like, I have to tell the truth. I can't just sit here and take this nonsense and be lied to every day. And I quit watching the news 8 years ago because I was tired of being lied to every day. So yeah, ramifications, whatever. Like, doors will open. If certain doors get closed, it's that saying, right?
Right. And I think that's why I wanted you to kind of finish with that, was because all of us have to be in that position right now where we're just okay. We're just okay with that. If that's what it comes down to, like, we have to speak truth. We don't have to be jerks about it, but we need to be able to speak truth. We need to be free to do that. And if we can be free in doing it, then we're actually going to lose people, but we're also going to gain people. and we're going to help others, and they're going to see that they can walk away from it. You know, Carrie walked away from social justice. You walked away from a cult and are now warning people about the cults that are rising. Joshua saw it and he walked away, and he's warning people from a different perspective. And it's happening over and over and over again. There's an entire walk away movement. I'd like to see it get platformed more, but it's out there. And so, Veronica, I know that, like I said, with third time's a charm so far, it's gone really well. I really appreciate you being willing to share your story. I want to try and connect you with my friend Brandon from Indies Coffee because he's trying to launch a label. He's not just making coffee. He wants to launch an independent movie production studio, and I'd really like to connect you with him.
Okay.
We'll see how that works. I got to get him. He's going to make me a coffee for my website. So I don't know I don't know what Minnesota Black Robe Regiment coffee is going to taste like.
Okay.
So, but I want to see you tell your story more. And that's the one thing I'm going to tell you. Start telling your story in different parts. You have the ability, having, looked in, going into acting. Use your channel, not just to do your comedic content, which especially your sarcasm, which is really good. I appreciate that. But I would encourage you to start telling your story, because people are going to notice that and they're going to see it. So for everybody who's watching, Veronica's got a story to tell, and we're going to work on getting her to tell it on her own channel as well. But use this as a platform to go and check her out and go buy some of her t-shirts. Like, if you're a cat fan, I'm not, but she'll still talk to me. So do you see the look she just gave me? So Veronica, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and as always, for everyone, don't worry about your safety. Don't worry about what you're being protected from. Fight for your liberty and your freedom, and Sic Semper Tyrannis.